All right, I should be live. It's questionable at best, but technically we're live. So thank you for being here on another Monday night, and we're going to hang out and discuss exactly what's going on with the HPA, or the Hearing Protection Act, and the SHORT Act, which is covering SBRs and SBSs, or short-barreled rifles and short-barreled shotguns, because right now is a very tight period of time where we have the ability to act, or at least try to push representatives to do the right thing regarding Second Amendment rights, that we may never receive time like this again anytime in the near future. In fact, it just might not exist. And that's why I wanted to do this live stream about it tonight, because it's a very limited situation, right? We have a very limited amount of time for these things to actually go through and actually be successful, in the sense of removing things from the NFA that shouldn't be there in the first place. And I just felt an obligation to try to spread that message and get people motivated to try to do something about it, since this week is going to be extremely determining as to whether or not this is going to go forward. So we have people coming in with the 5x5s. We have Kevin Purdy, 5x5, Harbor Prepper, Bjorn, David Baise, Sherman Sales is a try-by-lug. You know, I only have one try-by-lug device in my inventory right now, and I don't even have the Hearing Protection Act related item needed to attach to it. So I'm working on that, but hey, maybe it'll be a lot easier for me here in the near future if we can actually get it together, right? Let's see here. We have Fat Tuna with the 2x2. And you know what? That sounds like some Dr. Seuss type stuff, and I'm here for it. And we also have Dave Sickles. Good evening, Magic. Well, good evening to you as well. Now, obviously, Magic Prepper, the name didn't really pan out how I originally planned, because my dance moves aren't exactly what I thought they would be, and I definitely don't look good half naked. So here we are doing it the way that it was intended to be, just talking about preparedness, firearms, and stuff related to it. And so I just wanted to go ahead and apologize to you about that, Dave Sickles. Now, Armed and Prepped New York, we need a win. I agree. And so let's go ahead and jump into this. And hey, what's up? Paleo Greenbird finally caught alive. Well, I appreciate you being a loyal Replay Crew member, and I appreciate you being here live as well. That's always a good thing, and I like being able to hang out and chat with everybody. And of course, it's just nice for you guys to be able to check in live every so often too. So we'll let's go ahead and put your comment up on the screen. I want you to feel special, because you are special, and I like you. Now, let's get going. So in case you're not aware of what's happening, right now we have the ability to get the Hearing Protection Act as well as the SHORT Act into the reconciliation bill that's going through Congress right this second, which eventually has to go through the Senate, and then obviously at the very end gets signed by the president. And we have a president right now who's basically said that they're not going to stop themselves from signing a bill just because of firearms related material, meaning that if there's pro Second Amendment items within the bill, that it will be signed by the president. So we have to get it through the House of Representatives, we have to get it through the Senate, and then we can possibly find ourselves in a situation where suppressors, short-barreled rifles, and short-barreled shotguns are no longer regulated. But we're finding ourselves running into some obstacles, including obstacles on our side, right, which let's just not even get into that. But basically, Republicans have control of the House and control of the Senate currently, and so they have the ball in on their side of the court, and they're not necessarily moving forward aggressively in the sense of trying to do this thing that we all want them to do. So let's talk about that real quick. First off, we had the reconciliation bill, which is also lovingly being referred to as the one big beautiful bill. So keep that in mind. But the House Budget Committee voted late Sunday night, last night, so this was kind of a rare event, to advance President Donald Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act after several GOP hardliners blocked the measure from moving forward on Friday. And that was due to some of these recent events regarding the lack of the Hearing Protection Act and the SHORT Act being included. So we have these guys that are actually trying to hold strong, but we need to support them, and we need to get our representatives on board so that way we can make these things happen, because they are facing challenges. Now, the vote passed down party lines 17-16, with 4 Republicans voting present. Conservative representatives Chip Roy, Andrew Clyde, Josh Breachin, and Ralph Norman all voted present, a change from their no votes on Friday, which was the issue for Friday, right? Now, next, the Rules Committee will hold its meeting midweek, teeing up a vote on the floor by the end of the week. So we have a midweek vote teeing up the final vote, basically, by the end of this week. So we have this week alone to push these people to get in there and do their job. The rest of this is all stuff that, we can talk about. The bill is obviously being focused on more in the financial aspect because it is a reconciliation bill. There's a lot of stuff in there. And we'll talk about a little bit more of that later just so you can see what it is that's also in the bill. But the reason why this is being done currently regarding the Hearing Protection Act and the SHORT Act, which is the Stop Harassing Owners of Rifles Today Act, which, you got to make the acronym work, I guess. But regardless, the reason they're using this opportunity is because it's reconciliation. So it doesn't require the supermajority in the Senate to be able to vote it through. All you need is a simple majority, which means that this is one of the few opportunities where the Republican majority could actually push something through that was impactful, especially related to the National Firearms Act, which is something that shouldn't exist anymore, but here we are. Now, the other thing we have to keep in mind is that because of all of this going through right now, there are some rules and regulations within the Senate that could stop it in its tracks based on something related to, what's it called? The Byrd rule, I believe. But regardless, there's ways that you have to force this in there to make sure that it is relevant to the budget, right? So then when you start talking about the $200 tax stamp and things of that nature, then you can start kind of forcing it to fit the bill of something that would affect the budget overall. But the problem is that Republicans are scared of moving forward too far with it because that Byrd rule could come into play and possibly stop it in its tracks if it's not modified in such a way that they don't, figure out that it's not necessarily for the budget. So it's a whole big shitstorm in all honesty, but it's something that we need to push forward on because these things should not be regulated under the NFA, and that's all there is to it. Now, we're going to jump in here for a second. What's up, Gen X Gemini? Good to see you. We got Savage Lee here, just prepping in guns. Keep your clothes on. I'll try my best, okay? Look, times are getting a little tight. The economy is what it is. And, and I'm also, just trying to branch out and figure out some new revenue streams. So just, let me explore a little bit, figure myself out, try to get a hang for who I really am. Let's see here. King Hunter Nick says, nothing will pass. Everything Trump is doing won't hold. Well, especially with that attitude, right? So if we can get something to pass, that'd be great. Right now, currently, something has passed technically. And so you're not necessarily correct there, but the thing is that it's not what we want, although there is something at least that has happened already, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. But I want you to kind of, keep that in mind because you can have that mentality and then just have nothing, and that's fine if that's how you want to roll. But at the same time, something has already passed that is better than what we currently have, although it's not fixing the problem in total. So let's talk about that. First, I want to go ahead and share this letter that is an open letter to reform the National Firearms Act. And it's from a conglomerate of a bunch of different gun rights groups and legal entities and things of that nature. And this was from May 17th, so Saturday, before the vote from the House committee went through. Okay, so now we have to go ahead and just go through this to give everyone here, in case anyone's not exactly sure what it is we're referring to, a good basis so then we can move forward and talk a little bit more about some of the additional information and why we need to start pushing these people to do their jobs and to be on our side regarding Second Amendment legislation. So to these people, right, you don't need to get into that. It's not really that big of a deal, but as leaders of the undersigned organizations, we demand immediate inclusion of portions of the Hearing Protection Act, H.R. 404, and the Stop Harassing Owners of Rifles Today Act, H.R. 2395, in the forthcoming reconciliation bill. These critical pieces of legislation address long-standing unjust restrictions imposed by the National Firearms Act of 1934, which infringe upon the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding Americans. That failure to incorporate these bills into the reconciliation package would represent a profound missed opportunity to restore individual liberty, protect public health, and uphold constitutional guarantees. The Hearing Protection Act, H.R. 404, introduced by Representative Ben Cline, Republican Virginia, seeks to remove firearm suppressors from the NFA's burdensome regulatory framework, replacing it with a streamlined purchase process for typical accessories. Suppressors, contrary to popular misconceptions, do not silence firearms, but significantly reduce noise levels, mitigating the risk of permanent hearing loss for shooters and hunters. The American Academy of Otolaryngology, Head and Neck Surgery, has endorsed suppressors as effective tools for preventing hearing damage, a public health concern affecting millions of Americans. The current NFA requirements, including a $200 tax stamp for both manufacture and transfer of the devices, extensive paperwork, and excessive waiting times, serve no meaningful public safety purpose while imposing undue financial and administrative burdens on responsible citizens. With over 4.8 million suppressors in civilian circulation, their widespread use underscores the need for reform. Yes, common use is a real thing. Similarly, the SHORT Act addresses the arbitrary NFA classification of short-barreled rifles and short-barreled shotguns, which subjects them to the same onerous regulations as transferable machine guns and other highly restricted devices. This outdated framework, rooted in 1930s era fears of organized crime, lacks relevance in the modern context, where SBRs and SBSs pose no greater threat than standard rifles or shotguns. The SHORT Act would delist these firearms from the NFA, eliminating unnecessary barriers to ownership and ensuring that law-abiding Americans are not penalized for exercising their constitutional rights. Language compliant with the U.S. Senate Byrd Rule, which is the rule I referred to earlier, is circulating the Second Amendment community and should be incorporated in the current budget reconciliation package. The urgency of including this language in the reconciliation package cannot be overstated. Recent reports indicate that the House Ways and Means Committee has delayed action on both H.R. 404 and H.R. 2395, potentially due to lobbying efforts that prioritize commercial interests over the public good. We'll talk about that here in a second, because there is something that you need to be aware of regarding that whole situation, and it is something that I want to bring up so that you at least have the ability to do some research and pay attention for when more information comes out about it, but it is concerning, let's just say. Such delays are unacceptable, particularly when public sentiment, as reflected in numerous grassroots calls to action, overwhelmingly supports NFA reform. The reconciliation process offers a unique opportunity to bypass Senate filibuster constraints, ensuring that these common sense reforms reach the House floor and become law. Failure to seize this moment risks further entrenching an antiquated and unconstitutional regulatory regime. Okay, so it goes through and starts talking about, every town for gun safety and all these other groups and the Second Amendment and what it protects and everything else. And then it has all the people who have signed on to this letter demanding that this action occurs. So I wanted to go through that because it was a good representation of what these two acts are and what it is that they're trying to do in the sense of removing the burdens of the NFA from these particular items. And it was also mentioning the fact that there's been delays when it comes to the Ways and Means Committee, which is the previous committee that voted on the bill to pass it without the Hearing Protection Act or the SHORT Act included, and only had a measure to remove the $200 tax stamp from suppressors alone, but not deregulate them from the NFA. So all that did was remove the $200, but still make you do the paperwork, make you have the wait time, make you have all of the legal restrictions regarding having that, filed format through the ATF and everything else related to it, and having restricted items creates, more barriers. So it's not what we wanted. And yes, currently that is what is, at least to my knowledge, in the bill. As of right now, the bill has the suppressors removed from the $200 tax burden, but still in the NFA. Now, I have heard other people say that it's actually removed from the NFA as well, and that basically the Hearing Protection Act has gone through, but the SHORT Act was not included. But from what I can find personally, because I don't have widespread connections, it still looks like to me that all we have is the $200 burden gone. The suppressors are still NFA regulated, and then the SHORT Act was completely removed, so there's nothing changing with short-barreled rifles or shotguns. And that's unacceptable because right now is one of the few times where we'll have a chance to actually get rid of this. So let's get into this whole thing really quick here, where we're going to talk about this little situation where the Ways and Means Committee has delayed action on both H.R. 404 and H.R. 2395, potentially due to lobbying efforts that prioritize commercial interests over the public good. Why was this included in here? Well, here's the thing. There's been a lot of, let's just say, hubbub about the potential of industry insiders creating problems with getting these acts passed because of its potential damage to their business structure. Now, I don't have personal evidence of this or proof or anything like that. But there's been a lot of talk about Silencer Central being involved with this, and there's been receipts being shown online, and people are coming out saying that they have, inside knowledge of this and all types of things. I do not know for a fact this is happening. I do not have evidence of this. I'm bringing it to your attention because it is something that's being talked about a lot, to the point where Silencer Central had to put out a public statement about it. So maybe they aren't involved. I don't know. I can't prove that. I can't prove they are or are not. But what I can say is that somebody's doing something that is forcing these letters to include descriptions of lobbying for commercial interests. And we also have people coming out and saying that this is specifically happening on Capitol Hill. So it's something to pay attention to. I would keep an eye on this for a little bit to just see where this goes. I don't like to just make blanket statements when we don't have all the information yet, right? But I did want to bring this to your attention because they literally had to put out a statement saying that they are not lobbying against the HPA, which means, at least somebody is, in most, I would assume, because we have to admit, whether or not it's Silencer Central or any of these other suppressor-related businesses where the NFA is such a obstacle that they provide services that allow you to deal with it in a more convenient manner, that will affect their business model if the NFA restrictions around their products, the silencers, goes away, right? So these are all things that are relatively reasonable to assume, but obviously if somebody is caught doing that in the sense of being a pro 2A company, it's going to hurt their reputation and probably ruin their business over the time. So, but that's also why I don't want to say any definite statements, because like I said, there's no proof of this currently technically, and because we don't have that proof, it would not necessarily be the right thing to do to just throw a company directly under the bus without proof, right? So, but there's enough attention being paid here to where they felt the need to publicly address it, which means I would publicly pay attention to everything else that's being put out here in the near future, because this stuff does happen and is real. Now, we also have some other things to talk about regarding that. I'm going to jump back here in the chat for a minute. Let's see here. D. Wade. See, D. Wade is already saying boycott Silencer Central. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying wait until we know for sure what's going on. Wait until we know for sure it's not a different company doing it, and that Silencer Central's actions maybe weren't necessarily nefarious. We just don't know all of the details yet, and we have to be reasonable and practical about our approach when it comes to demonizing companies before we have all of the information, right? And I'm just trying my best to be logical and reasonable about it. But if we find out for sure that that's what's happening, well, I think it's okay to pull out the pitchforks at that point, because that doesn't align with the ethos or what we all consider to be reasonable in the sense of Second Amendment rights. So that's just my opinion. Now, Ted Nugent says once in a lifetime opportunity, 100%. And that's where we are right now regarding this possible legislation. We need this to go through now, or it just isn't going to, right? If right now when the Republicans have the House, the Senate, and the White House, and we have this very pro-gun ethos going on in the ether, right? When it comes to how the average American gun owner is feeling right now, and how everybody assumes things should be, and how we're all disgruntled and frustrated by these ridiculous laws and arbitrary rules, this is the time, right? This is the time, especially because we have this reconciliation opportunity where you don't need all of the majority votes and everything else in order to get it through. So I agree 100%. This is the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Now, Gnostic Nomad says it hasn't been a good week for them on X. Yeah, and I agree with that. But you know what? It also it took a little bit of heat off of Sig Sauer for a minute, right? So, and I saw a meme about that, and I had to admit that I found it pretty funny. So so someone else is talking about contacting your representatives. I actually posted the U.S. Capitol Switchboard Operator phone number in the description of tonight's live stream. So it's in there. I'll put it in the live chat right now too. That's the phone number. Wait a second. That's not what I copied. Hold on a second. Yeah, why did that not work? That's weird. Okay, so now I'll actually put the phone number in. There we go. House leadership and the Ways and Means Committee already rejected full deregulation once. Correct. So, and that's funny that I had that copied. So that is the problem right now. So the Hearing Protection Act and the Short Act were rejected by the House Ways and Means Committee, right? Which is a problem, which is why we had the fallout with the recent, bill being passed through the House. Which committee was that again? I am now confused. Give me 1 second. I've been mixing up a lot of my descriptions tonight because of how many different words there are for the same exact thing in this stupid system that we currently have. The House Budget Committee, okay. So it's hard to keep track of all these committees, man. I'm not a committee guy. I don't pay attention to committees on a regular basis, but here we are. So that is the switchboard that will get you the phone number for your representative and get you connected to somebody that is in your district or represents your state when it comes to the Senate. And that way you can push them because we need that right now. This is what needs to be done. We have to push these people to actually do their jobs. That phone number is 202-224-3121. Once again, that's 202-224-3121. Now, yes, I'm going to use that for my infomercial audit or auditions, and I'm going to try my best to get out there and become the next Billy Mays. But for now, I'm just going to have to still be a YouTube guy. Anyway, you can also email them, says Michael D223. That's true, but I will tell you this. I do not get email responses, and it really makes me angry. So I think calling might be the better way to go because the email thing just kind of falls through the cracks, in my opinion. Now, oh yes, call, and then go back to sitting on your haunches and complaining when none of the legal action works. Well, you know what? If it doesn't happen, then we know, right? But if it does, like now's the only opportunity. So I don't know what to tell you. Like if you don't want to do anything about it, that's fine. But then if it doesn't work, then you're just going to say, well, I knew it wasn't going to work. But that doesn't really help either, does it? So that's just very, defeatist of you, I would say. And I would prefer to at least try because if something does happen, great. Because something already has happened. And that's what I'm trying to convey here. They've already removed the $200 tax burden from suppressors. Like that's already in the bill. Right now it's in the bill. So if they have done that already, why can't we get them to do a little bit more? So like they've already done something. We need them to do like the whole thing, the thing that's supposed to be done. But they have done something, which means that it's reasonable for us to try to get more done. But like we can't just say, oh, nothing's going to happen. Literally, something has happened already. It just already has. So just throwing this out there. Now, let's talk about some of the stuff that GOA's been putting out to give you some ideas about where that all stands. Okay, Gun Owners America. Let's see here. I want to make sure we're not playing anything right now because that's just my voice. Don't worry about that. Okay, so Representative Andrew Clyde is fighting for the inclusion of the HPA and SHORT Act in the budget reconciliation bill. Does your congressman have his back? Call and ask, and there's the phone number once again. This is from 2 hours ago. Like, this is the time. We have this week. The middle of the week is when they're going to have another vote, and then they're going to put it to the floor, and then at the floor, we have the opportunity to amend the bill further. Before the next vote, we have the opportunity to amend the bill further. There's still very small amounts of time, but also very extreme capabilities of amending this bill to actually have what we need in it, but it has to happen like this week. Like this is it. So that's why we're doing this live stream tonight, because like this is it. That's all I got. Okay. Now, let's see here. We also have a few other posts here I wanted to talk about. For 90 years, the NFA has subjected Americans to unconstitutional 2A infringements. Budget reconciliation provides a rare opportunity to remove them. That's why I'm fighting to eliminate the taxation and registration of suppressors and short-barreled firearms. Now, there is something on here that I wanted to talk about because I can't verify it, like I said before, but here's what's being said by Representative Clyde. We've made progress in eliminating both the taxation and registration of suppressors under the NFA. I'm fighting to restore additional 2A constitutional rights and will continue negotiating in good faith to improve this legislation before we pass the final product. So this statement was from 11 hours ago. And like I said, from my understanding, only the $200 burden has been removed from suppressors specifically, but this makes it sound like, the taxation and registration of suppressors under the NFA had some progress made on it. So maybe I'm just like missing that piece of information, or I haven't found that exact reporting yet, but that's also something that's out there. So I want to make sure to mention that because it is possible that we've even gone further than just removing the $200 tax burden, but I can't find that, for certain. Like I can't find like that exact piece of evidence that says for sure that that's what's happened so far. And that's why I don't want to report it like it has, because I just don't know for sure. But people who have connections in Washington, D.C. might be aware of it and might be able to report on these things first and foremost because they talk to somebody directly, but I don't have that. So I'm just going off of what I can find based on, what news is reporting and what different advocacy groups are reporting and what information is being put out there publicly. Now, let's see here. Hustle Bones, it has to happen. I hope it happens. Recon 6666661 says it's never going to happen, period. But something already has happened. So, like, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, we actually might be able to do this, like, for the first time and last time ever. So, like, let's try to do it instead of just saying it won't happen. Because something has happened. Like, even if we only get the $200 removal, which is still BS, right? Like, that's not what we want, and we definitely want more, and we definitely deserve more. But if that's all we get out of this, that's still something that we didn't have before. I'm not going to say that's going to make me happy, and I'm not going to say that that's okay. But what I'm saying is, like, even removing that $200 burden is still something. So, like, we can't just say nothing's going to happen when something already has. And at the same time, I mean, that $200 burden might be enough for some people to get into the suppressor game that might not have gotten into it before, just due to the fact that it's less expensive now to do, right? And it's like one of the things I struggle with. I want to get a nice 22 caliber can for my bolt action 22 long rifle for dealing with, gophers and stuff on the property. And it's just hard for me to say, yeah, I'll buy this $300 can and then pay a $200 tax stamp on it, because that totally feels worth it, right? So, like, that's just, that would probably let a lot of people in the door that aren't in the door right now. But even so, that's just not enough. It's not where we need to be. Now, let's see. I saw Luke B say something that I found interesting. I'd rather pay double the tax but no paperwork. See, and I get where you're coming from on that, right? Like, if you could just go buy one in the store right now and, like, just pay the tax and leave and all that stuff, I get that. Like, I understand. I don't want to do any of the paperwork or any of that, though, because that's, that's a further infringement than even just the Second Amendment at that point. Like, we're talking about other things related to personal privacy rights and whatnot. But regardless, like, I get what you're saying. Trust me, 100%. So, T. Fisher says, true, it's a little W. It's a little W for now. I don't think it's good enough, and I don't think it's okay for them to say, look, we did it. Like, no, you're not going to get a participation trophy for that one. Like, we need the full deal. That's what you're here for. That's why, I don't know how we're going to get these Republicans to figure it out, right? Like, be apolitical all you want or whatever you want to be, right? But at the end of the day, if we're talking about firearms rights and stuff, you're definitely not going to have a lot of friends from the Democrat side regardless. Like, it's just the reality of it, right? And these Republicans really need to understand that there's a large portion of single issue voters out there that are just 2A focused only. And I don't think they give enough credit to their being elected by these people who are only worried about their Second Amendment rights and nothing else. And so, like, at the end of the day, like, they should be taking this a lot more seriously instead of looking at it as like a secondary agenda, right? Now, let's see. Tactical Muffin Top says the best prepping we can do is get our bodies in better shape, grow our own food, and grow a trustworthy community. Together we can make it. Well, you know what? That is all good advice, and I agree with it. I think being healthy is important. I try my best to stay healthy. I think growing your own food is great. I also think it's much more difficult and much more time-consuming than a lot of people want to admit. And then I also think that community aspect is extremely important. So I agree with all the points of it. I just want to, also say that if you can't spend the time or the effort to have the land or anything like that to grow your own food and only eat your own food and sustain yourself, you shouldn't feel dissuaded from being prepared because of that fact. You should just still do your best and do what you can and not feel like you can't. There's no point in trying just because you can't meet that criteria, right? I just want to make sure to address that because I know that's a problem sometimes. Now, let's talk about this big, beautiful bill really quick, just so you're aware of what's all in it, regardless of the the Short Act and the Hearing Protection Act, okay? So first off, it's the largest tax cut in American history. It delivers permanent tax cuts and bigger paychecks. This means an extra $5,000 in Americans' pockets with a double-digit % decrease to their tax bills. Americans earning between $30,000 and $80,000 will pay around 15% less in taxes. It includes no tax on tips and no tax on overtime. It provides historic tax relief to Social Security recipients. It slashes taxes on senior Social Security benefits. It protects Medicaid for Americans by removing 1.4 million illegals from Medicaid benefits. It makes President Trump's border security permanent. It funds President Trump's border wall. As a result, 701 miles of primary wall, 900 miles of river barriers, and 629 miles of secondary barriers, and 141 miles of vehicle and pedestrian barriers will be constructed, along with cutting-edge technology that will secure our homeland for generations to come. It boosts Border Patrol and ICE agents on the front line. And then this will, hire 10,000 new ICE personnel, 5,000 new customs officers, and 3,000 new Border Patrol agents. Yes, is there potentially issues with developing this militarized police state in the process? I think that's something we always have to consider and be realistic about. But at the end of the day, if it's securing the border and we have to do it, I mean, I guess that's a good thing. But I always try to keep that in the back of my mind that, this eventually could be bad, right? So that's just how I look at things. It's hard not to be cynical. Finally, it modernizes air traffic control. It fulfills President Trump's plan to completely overhaul the systems that keep Americans flying safely and efficiently, and it ends taxpayer-funded sex changes for minors. And it prohibits Medicaid from funding gender transition procedures for minors. So that's what's in the bill, and those are the big talking points and the big promotions from the White House for why this needs to be passed. But notice that it doesn't mention any of the Second Amendment related items. So like I said, this shouldn't be a secondary issue or a secondary item that's on the agenda just because some people think it's a good idea. I feel like it should be on this website as well and should be promoted as being very important and very, prolific as to why this should be happening right now. So here's the thing. Keep this in mind, all right? We have a lot of ways to get this through because there's still a process, right? So we passed the Budget Committee. It went to the Rules Committee, and then that passed. It passed the Budget Committee, then it has to go to the Rules Committee, and then it goes to the floor for debate, and then it goes for the full House vote after that. Okay, and then amendments can be made before or during the floor debate. Okay. The longer this thing goes on for, the harder it is to get these amendments added back in. So we need to be pushing these people now, ASAP, to push them, okay? My congressman or congresswoman is Julie Federchek, right? So I'm going to call her, email her, do all the things. That's what you need to be doing to your representatives as well. And honestly, I've reached out to my representatives multiple times, including the governor and the state congressman or woman. And do you get a response always? No. But the pressure should be there. And if we get more pressure, they're going to at least be aware of the fact that there is that pressure. And it might make a difference. It might not. But we have to at least try while we have these opportunities, which are very rare. Okay. Now, the Byrd rule situation is weird too. The Byrd rule basically says that everything has to be related to the budget. And so if they try to push everything on there and they can't prove that it's budget related, which I think they could because it's all related to a $200 tax stamp, which means that suddenly frees up things in the sense of lack of processing and paperwork required by the ATF. So then there are additional budget cuts can occur there. The $200 being removed suddenly makes it so there's a deficit of funding for this or that, right? So I would assume that could be, forced into a reconciliation program pretty easily. But the idea is that you'd have to prove it to be so that way the Democrats in the Senate can't use the Byrd rule to remove them completely from the bill. So that's something that we have to be aware of, that they're going to try to use in order to defeat these bills or these acts from being implemented into the bill. Now, why do we want this to happen? Okay, so first off, there's a few things that I want you to think about. One, this deregulates things that not only should we be considering for preparedness purposes, but also just make shooting easier and more enjoyable for the majority of people. Now, personally, I've been kind of going back and forth lately about running a suppressor or not, depending on the rifle system and the philosophy of use and all those types of things, right? But at the same time, I think you should have them as an option regardless. Even if I were to choose a rifle right now that I didn't plan on using a suppressor on, the majority of the time, I still have them all set up with a quick detach method so that way I could bring a suppressor with me, let's say in a backpack or something like that, and then I could attach it at my leisure depending on whatever is happening where it might be required. So if something was occurring that I needed to make a shot at longer distances, but without giving away my location as easily, then I can bring out the suppressor, attach it, and then engage because I'm at a long-range distance position where people aren't going to necessarily be expecting it or whatever, right? These are all things that I think about hypothetically in my brain. That is weird, and I understand that. But at the same time, if you knew you were going to have to go into a building or do something like that, now you might want to be running a suppressor. But we also have to remember that suppressors are harder on the life of your parts, harder on the life of your barrel, or at least of your firearm in general, and at the same time is additional weight, which makes the weapon, less wieldy, longer, and heavier. So we have trade-offs, but that doesn't mean the barrier shouldn't be wide open for us to decide when those things are, welcome to be used. And I have 2 suppressors right now. That's it. I don't have a ton. I have 2. But honestly, the process of getting them was, horrendous and ridiculous. So it is what it is. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that short-barreled rifles and shotguns are also something that we should be able to easily acquire and consider. The idea of using a pistol brace in order to make something a pistol just so we can use it in the same configuration that we would a short-barreled rifle should already make this entire situation a moot point. The common use fact should be in place at this point in time where none of these things are even being considered by the NFA because so many people are using them in these configurations with braces where it's just an analog, right? And at that point in time, we understand the usefulness of having something compact, lightweight, mobile, and easily transportable. And that's very basic, right? I don't even have to explain that. And the fact that the difference of a brace or a stock is the only thing we're discussing here should demonstrate how unreasonable it is that if somebody doesn't know what they're doing, right, and they put a stock on a AR pistol because, oh, I like the stock better than that thing it came with, right? Or they put a vertical foregrip on an AR pistol because, well, I just like how much more comfortable it is for my forearm now, right? Or for my weak side hand. Okay, so now you just committed a felony and you didn't even realize it, right? And now you're, possibly going to be fined like $250,000 and go to prison for 10 years. All because you just didn't know that the thing you bought off the rack at the gun store wasn't allowed to have this other accessory attached to it just because of arbitrary or ridiculous laws. So not only are these things useful for preparedness purposes, for self-defense and any other scenario you can think of where having a firearm would be relevant, but at the same time, it's to protect people that don't know any better from going to prison or getting in trouble over things that shouldn't even be an issue to begin with. So that's one of the biggest issues for me is that, especially being part of this community, look, I go on the local classifieds on a regular basis, and I constantly see, AR pistols with vertical foregrips on them, or AR pistols with stocks on them, or all kinds of stuff, right? Like, and it's just people that just don't know. They're not doing something wrong intentionally. They're not trying to break the law. They're not trying to be a criminal. They literally just don't know because you have to go out of your way to understand all these little contrivances regarding the NFA, and most people aren't going to do that. They bought something at the store. It's legal to them. They're just going to do what they want to do with it now because they think that, well, I bought it, so we're good to go. And that's why this whole thing is so ridiculous, right? So, Savage Lee, we have a great group. We have a diesel mechanic fabricator. He made his solar system huge. We have a member who has 10 acres of blue and raspberries. That sounds like a good group right there, Consco. Good job on that. I think you're in a good spot right there. Now, and honestly, like that's the whole networking thing. Like this is what we're talking about, right? We want people to be able to network. We want people to be able to build community, and we want people to have something to offer, right? Like what do you have to offer your group or a potential group that you're not even part of yet? What do you have to offer them? So let's see here. Joe Dutchman, I don't need a suppressor. I want one, and some ranges prefer them. Yeah, and that's the thing. You don't need one. Nobody needs one, but we should be able to have them. And they are preferable for just sound suppression. Like the idea of the Hearing Protection Act is legitimately a good idea for protecting people's hearing. I have, tinnitus every so often because of how much I shoot and the fact that, I'm a musician and I used to play very loud concerts, right? So like I have a lot of hearing related problems, I guess, that I expect to have much worse problems with in the future because of these things being so loud. But if suppressors were more accessible, more people would use them and less people would have hearing damage. Because yes, I still wear hearing protection even when I'm running a suppressor just because it's better for me. But the suppressor does make a significant difference in the rapport of your firearm. So I agree with the idea of it being like a health concern, even more so than just being like a fundamental right. Like it is a fundamental right. We shouldn't have to worry about anything. And in fact, suppressors to me should be completely unregulated. And I believe that even right now they're talking about removing them from the NFA, removing the $200 tax stamp, but then still treating them like a firearm, like a Title I firearm, where you would have to do a 4473 form in order to acquire one and buy it through your local gun store. And I still don't agree with that either, because in all honesty, it's just a piece of metal. It literally can do nothing by itself. If you bought it by itself, it has no function, right? But if you attach it to your firearm, you now suddenly have a suppressed firearm. But you have to have the firearm to do that, and you already had to do the paperwork on the firearm to be able to do that. So like, why are we trying to keep them in some level of regulation when they are an inert object otherwise, right? So like, I don't agree with that. I think they should just be a straight up accessory you buy on the shelf, and it should be on the rack right next to the stocks and right next to, your magazines and everything else. But that's just me. Let's see here. Peter Roos says we can buy suppressors over the counter here. Not sure why they try to restrict. And is that in Texas, Peter Roos? Because I'm pretty sure I remember Texas passing their own suppressor legislation in the past where that made that a possibility. Let's see here. T. Fisher says, that's so true, Magic Monkey Love. It takes many hands to make a real homestead work, is what they said. Yes. And that's one of the biggest issues with homesteading is if you're the only one doing it and you don't have the heavy equipment or any of the fancy stuff to make it work, it becomes a very time-consuming endeavor that a lot of us maybe just don't have the time for, unfortunately, and that's just the truth of it. Okay? Let's see here. So, and I just want to, make sure you guys, just to touch base on it one more time. Call your representatives. Make them feel like they have to do something, okay? I'll put that switchboard number back in the chat once again. I just really want to make sure we're trying here. And that's why I wanted to use this live stream as a platform to try to push that and to try to explain what was going on, because I'm sure many people had no idea that this was even happening or even a possibility right now. And the possibility is that we might wake up in a short period of time here and say, we can just buy suppressors at the store now. We can just buy short-barreled rifles and short-barreled shotguns right at the store and not have to worry about paperwork and not have to pay a $200, extortion tax or anything like that. We can just own these things without any additional regulation, as it should be, because there is no safety risk for owning these items. The same crime you can commit with a 16-inch barreled AR is the same crime you can commit with an 11.5-inch barreled AR. Nothing changes. But for some reason, these arbitrary laws from the 30s are still affecting us to this day. And pistol braces, the one thing I'll give them credit for is that they proved that there is no difference, that there isn't any change in patterns or behaviors or crime when it comes to something having a bracer or having a stock, right? Like, these things are still available and still in mass circulation and are still not the majority of crimes. And plus, let's be honest, when you see, gangbangers using AR pistols, they don't even have a brace on them. Usually it's just the empty buffer tube. I don't know what the phenomenon there is, but it is certainly a phenomenon, because the logic is insane to me. Like, I'm going to go commit crimes, but I'm not going to put a stock on this still because, that would be illegal. It's crazy to me, okay? Let's see. Ripcurl readiness. How much time do we have to call in? So we have this whole week, basically, and we should push them as much as we can. We should have been calling already, to be honest with you, but we have the middle of the week, another vote comes in. By the end of the week, they're trying to push it to the floor vote, and anytime in between now and then, they could re-add those or make amendments to this bill, including adding the Hearing Protection Act and the Short Act back into it. So that's what it is we need to push for, and that's what we need to try to make happen, because I don't know what to say. If we can get suppressors and short-barreled rifles and short-barreled shotguns off of the NFA, it's a win for everybody. It just is. Especially it's a win for people who just didn't know what they were doing was illegal to begin with, right? Because that's the biggest crime here, is when people are specifically, just being a law-abiding citizen, go to the store, buy this thing, cool, I like it, throw a stock on it, throw a vertical foregrip on it because, it's a little bit more ergonomic now, and boom, 10 years in prison, $250,000 fine, all because of just something they had no idea about. And that's really the tragedy, right? Let's see here. Now, the Smoke says Huxworks, #Huxworks, right? Now, here's the problem. I have a Huxworks Ventum. It's been a good suppressor. Yes, it's very sparky, but it's also titanium, so it makes sense. Regardless, it's flow through, all that good stuff. I know there's a little bit of pushback right now in Huxworks because they gave they got a contract for the ATF to use their suppressors for all their tactical weaponry and stuff, and of course that's just a bad look because we're giving the ATF these suppressors and probably on short-barreled rifles because they need them for safety purposes and for their hearing and for their ability to avoid cancer because of the gases and everything else. Now the flow through pushes out the front. That's great. I'm glad the ATF can decide that they need the suppressors with the better technology and they need the shorter barrels for, maneuverability and portability and transport that we aren't supposed to be able to easily have because, they need it to be able to enforce those laws on us because why, right? Why would that make sense? I don't know, but that's what they said. So I know Huxworks got some flack for that, which, I get, but at the same time, they're a business and a government contract came in and they said, okay, yeah, I guess we'll make money. And then everyone got mad, but it's like, I mean, that's what businesses do. They take contracts and they fulfill orders. So I can see it from both sides, but it's still not a good look, especially because it's specifically the ATF, right? You like 2A enemy number one. Like I don't know how else to say it. Now, let's see here. Full auto's overrated, says Magic. Waste of ammo and a lot of shots off target. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of been my thought process too. And that's why I don't have like a super safety or do any like FRT style triggers or anything like that. I think they're cool, and I think sure you can have them if you want them and they're legal for you, go for it, right? Like, I'm not against them. I just personally, I'm not even good enough shooting semi-auto, right? Like I'm working on it. I'm always training and trying to get better. But like if my doubles aren't, money on the dot when it comes to just running my semi-auto platforms, like why am I going to up the ante with like an FRT and assume I'll, maintain any level of accuracy or capability, right? Like I have to be realistic about my own skill level, and it's just not there yet. So that's just why I don't have any interest there, and maybe I just can't really afford the ammo bill on that either. Kryptonian, thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Let's see here. Let's get you posted. Kryptonian. They should be split into two categories. 0 decibel renamed as actual silencers and 20 decibel plus for actual sound suppressors. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's probably just not that big of a deal though, because in all reality, like the semantics aren't really the issue right now. The issue right now is just like we should just have them no matter what they are, right? Because even if they were silent, so what? But the problem is with that also, a suppressor could be more silent with a different caliber than another caliber, right? So like, how do you necessarily differentiate that? Because a suppressor on a subsonic 22 long rifle might sound like it's a silencer, right? Basically 0 decibels, but then you go ahead and use that same suppressor because it's rated for it on like a 45 ACP, and you're gonna hear more, right? So like, I don't know how that would work, but that's just kind of my opinion on that, I guess. So let's see here. Back into the chat for a minute. Traveler 1970 says Rare Breed still does not have their website ready, even though FRTs are legal now, maybe tomorrow. And yes, that is something that has happened recently. And another thing to kind of throw out there for you guys. Now look, FRTs, one of the things I don't like about them, and this is not against the manufacturers or the product at all. One of the things I don't like about them is that they're a unnecessary workaround for something that shouldn't be a problem to begin with, right? Like as a civilian in the United States of America with the Second Amendment, we should have access to full auto regardless. Like I don't think it should be regulated, and it's stupid that we have to use things like forced reset triggers to try to circumvent those rules. And so that's one of the reasons I don't like them. The same reason I don't like pistol braces isn't because there's something wrong with the product, and isn't because they aren't, useful to some degree. It's because the fact that we even need them in the first place is the problem, right? So like, I always kind of I try to keep that in mind when I think about these types of products. But regardless, one of the things that, especially for the naysayers in the chat tonight, they're saying like, oh, nothing ever happens, we never win anything or whatever. I will say like the FRT case is good now. The case against them was dropped, right? And now they're able to sell their triggers once again to the public, whereas the government was trying to stop them from being able to conduct business. So like we did win that one in the sense of that company is now allowed to once again sell their product because it was seen to not be a machine gun, right? So like there are things happening that are beneficial and are slightly positive here in the 2A arena, which is something I can appreciate, right? Let's see here. Joe Dutchman says pistol braces are kind of like the I lost my guns in a boating accident. Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I'm going to say this, okay? Personally, the things I do and the way I do things sometimes revolve around the fact that I post a lot of what I do publicly in video format, right? And so, like, if I decide I need to register an SBR with a Form 1 because of what I do in the public format regarding video content, then that's why I decided I needed to do that, right? If I'm using something with a pistol brace on it, it's because, I post things publicly in a format of video content that allows everyone to see what I'm doing, and I maintain a level of compliance with the law in order to not attract any, unnecessary intrusions, right? So, like, I have to do things a certain way because I do stuff publicly. But there's a potential that I would do things differently if I wasn't doing things publicly, right? But I don't know if that's true or not because I don't do things privately. Everything's public. So here we are, but that's just what I'm going to say. All right. Let's see here. Savici says, does separating the upper from the lower work for the brace issues, et cetera, et cetera? I can't tell you that. I can't give legal advice because I'm not a lawyer. And the thing is that there's different ways of looking at it in different states. And I know that there are some laws in certain states, especially where intent matters, right? And so if they could say, hey, this guy has a 10.5 inch upper and a lower with a stock on it, but he doesn't have any other uppers, and the lower doesn't have an upper on it. And so we can decide that he had the intent of putting that 10.5 upper on that lower because there's no other reason he would have the two separate otherwise, right? Like those are things that some states and some prosecutors try to get people for. And so just be aware of that. Like I said, I can't give you legal advice. I'm not a lawyer, so anything I'm saying right now isn't legal advice at all. But it is something that you have to consider that, like, depending on your state and the way they like to do things, like they can try to use that stuff against you, and it has happened to other people. So let's see here. Tom McStacker says, be careful, you don't want to get your dog killed. Right, that's why I file Form 1 paperwork when I have SBRs on the channel. And you see, me with a 13-inch SIG spear with a stock on it, yeah, that's Form 1 SBR. I got all the paperwork, it's all legit, because I don't need any problems with the government because of what I'm posting online, right? That would be dumb of me. So yeah, and then, when I have other guns that have pistol braces on them, it's because, well, they're in a pistol format, and that's just what they are. So it is what it is, Now, let's see here. I do want to also say that if this does go through, maybe it's a glimmer of hope for some better things to come in the future. I don't know. But if we can get short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and suppressors off the NFA and get rid of the $200 unconstitutional tax stamp and get rid of all the paperwork and the fingerprints and all the BS related to it and the wait times and everything else, guess what? Not only would that benefit all of us, but it would also probably stimulate the economy to a degree. And that's a good thing too, and we need that. And so I just hope this goes through, and I need your help to ensure that there's a better chance it does. And so to ensure that chance, call your representatives, email them, do whatever you got to do that makes you more comfortable or it makes it easier on you to do, and just tell them, we want this in this reconciliation bill. We want the one big, beautiful bill act to have the Hearing Protection Act and the Short Act. And that's all you got to do. It's really not that much effort. It's really not that much investment, but it could turn out to be a lot of beneficial legislation for us. And that's all there is to it, right? And this bill already has some good stuff in it if you're in those, income earning brackets, right? Where suddenly you might drop your taxation by 15%. It might put $5,000 in your pocket. It might help you if you're a waiter or a bartender, or if you work a lot of overtime, suddenly you're not paying taxes on that. Those are all good things too, right? Let's be honest. Like, that's not a bad thing. Like, I worked for tips for many, many years. I was a waiter and a bartender, and I did a lot of living off of tips. And if I didn't have to pay taxes on them, it would have made my life a lot easier. And everyone's like, oh, they don't claim their taxes anyway. That's not true. At the minimum, I had to claim every single credit card tip that I got. And guess what? Especially back then, but even now, I'm sure more than ever, the majority of your tips were on a card, because that's how people pay for stuff now, right? So, like, they're paying their taxes. Trust me. Like, it's not something I wanted to do, but I had to, right? And yeah, like, if you got some cash and you didn't necessarily have to report it all, that's what happens sometimes, right? I'm not saying I did it, but that's what happens sometimes. But I'm just saying that the majority of your earnings still came through a credit card, which meant it got taxed. So, throwing it out there. But listen, let's just do this, okay? Let's just do this. Let's try to get it done. And if I can just buy a suppressor at the store right off the shelf, I'm going to be pretty happy. If I can get an SBR right off the shelf, I'm going to be pretty happy. If I can chop down the barrel of my 12 gauge just because I want to with a hacksaw, I'm going to be pretty happy about that, okay? So let's make it happen. Call your reps and keep an eye out this week to see what's going on. And like I said, we don't know for a fact what's going on with that whole Silencer Central thing yet. So I'm trying to reserve judgment until we get more information. But it's not... Things don't look great in the sense that somebody is doing something from within the industry to try to screw us over on this. And that's not good. So I don't know who it is for sure, but I do know that you should probably pay attention to that too over this next week or so, because I don't think I would support a company that was doing that. Would you? So, Hustlebone says we know enough. I am trying my best to maintain a level of reservation just because these things have happened in the past where things weren't exactly what they were originally thought to be. So, listen. I appreciate you all. You're amazing. I appreciate replay crew. If you're here checking in the comment section, thank you for that because I always like coming back and seeing everybody say hello. And of course, if you find these videos valuable or, I don't know, at the bare minimum enjoyable, make sure you like, subscribe, and share the video. Especially this one. If you can share this one, I would appreciate it just to try to get more people to actually push their representatives to do this. And I think that would help a lot. But liking the video also helps because it will help share it a little bit more out there. And of course, if you're new here, just subscribe because you know what? I'm kind of a weirdo. And if that just doesn't sound good to you, I might do something weird enough to make you like me at some point. So, because that's how I did it in college, you know. All right, so besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.